TTT.
What up, bone ponies? It's Tabletop Totality, the podcast. We're back. I'm Cody, and I'm here with my boys,
Steven,
Neil.
And today, we're talking about making your own monsters. Or creatures, what have you. But really, we want to say monsters, because it sounds cooler.
A little creepy.
And we're going to go with that.
Yeah.
Creepy crawlies. We're all about it.
Mm.
So, maybe you have found yourself in your role-playing scenario, whether it's D&D or Call of Cthulhu or any such tabletop game, and you find the monster manual, or as we like to call it, the creature compendium, to be lacking, and you want to spice things up at the D&D table or the role-playing table. How do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, it's always, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, as they always say. And I think the best way we're going to tackle this is from one of our own points of view, from Steve here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so out of the three of us, I'm the only one that has very limited, almost no Overlord experience.
He's also barely housebroken, just
barely.
Keep that in mind.
They're working
been a
on
problem.
it. We're working on it.
Cardboard everywhere.
I just can't get those things to stick, But hopefully these lessons will stick better than those. But yeah, so I haven't really had a lot of experience creating my own creatures, and when I do, I sort of don't really have a lot of confidence in the creatures that I create, because I don't know if I'm doing it right, or if I'm just creating some trash or what. So I just so I figured I'd come with some questions that I might have, or that somebody that wants to create creatures would have, for these two to answer, because these guys have way more experience with creating creatures, and they do a good job of it.
Continue singing our praises.
Yes.
I mean, some of the time they do an okay job of it.
Even if a creature flops, it doesn't even really flop. That's how I designed it.
I mean, I designed it to fail. You're supposed to kill it. That's the only reason why it failed.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
Yeah, exactly. Rule number 1 right there.
Well, what we were saying before we were joking around was just fake it till you make it, and it is something that I think at some point you're going to have to run into, where you're just going to have to throw whatever you got out there and see what happens.
Hope for the best, yeah.
But
right.
I think Steve, you should start firing off some questions.
All right. So the first question I have, the most important one, I think, maybe. How do I make sure my monsters are balanced before pitting my players against them?
You don't. You just send it in there and you hope for a TPK.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
You're always shooting TPK. Honestly.
Players
That's
versus
the goal.
Players versus the DM is what we always talk about here.
You want to make the players miserable as much of the time as you can.
It's not about having fun. It's never about having fun.
If you can make one of them cry and walk away, then that's a win.
Right.
I mean,
so to answer your question seriously, though, the CR system is a little bit. I would say it's not perfect, and I'm not going to say it's flawed or it's bad, but it's just not perfect because it can't factor in everything for your party. Even for an example, I used a creature last night. Even I used a creature that I modified just slightly, and it was even underpowered for the group. Now, numerically, as the challenge rating system goes, it should have been a very difficult encounter, unmodified. And I knew that wasn't going to be the case, because you have to factor in, well, my characters have these magic items, or they have these powerful weapons, or things like that. So that's something you have to consider when it comes to balancing the creature. And then also, I always try to think of things too. It's like, well, if it's not quite tough enough, could I have 2 of them? Could I play with the numbers a little bit more? And then I think probably my last point would be can you try to compare it to something that they've already encountered? What was the last battle they had that that really challenged them, and compare that to what you're designing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that those are all really good points. And I feel like the biggest thing that you kind of touched on, like so if we're talking Dungeons and Dragons, what jumps up challenge ratings is things like resistances. Um where if your party deals its damages that aren't its resistance, that creature's then going to be weaker. So if it's just resistance to non-magical items, but your whole party has magical items, then that aspect of that creature is now not going to be as powerful. So it even goes if you're going up against a bunch of undead and your whole party is clerics paladins.
Yeah.
Any challenge rating there, you kind of have to double it because that's what they're good against. You know what I mean? So a lot of the time I look at, like Cody said, of course, you got to look at what your players are, what my items they have and everything along those lines. But then I look at if I'm creating a creature from scratch to get my challenge rating right, or even taking something from the book, I look at something that I've already put against them and I think, all right, what made this creature difficult? Was that challenge rating good for my party? And what does this next creature have to bring? And if it's not checking similar boxes,
Right.
it's probably going to be weak. Maybe I should throw 2 at him or 3. And that's, I think, just a good rule of thumb for any tabletop game. I always feel like it's harder to, as your party is starting out, so like your first level
Yes.
party, getting that
Yeah.
challenge rating, because there's certain creatures that their challenge rating might be like perfectly fine to go up against level 1s, but the good old troglodyte from 3.5, right?
Yeah. Even in 5th edition, it's still brutal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gets
We
2
learned
attacks
very quickly.
Yeah. There's a
and
challenge rating of like 1/4, and it's like nearly TPK'd us.
Yeah, I think
yeah,
it gets a multi attack that could kill like a low level character.
yeah,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
but
Yeah,
so
Frank threw that all
there's
at us.
but yeah, there's all those aspects that you kind of got to look at for a lot of challenge ratings and deciding what's balanced. And look at the creature, and if it's really the creature that you want to put them against, but you're worried about, hey, this resistance is fire, but they all deal ice damage, switch it to ice. It's now an ice version of that creature. You know what I mean?
And I think there's also just 2 other things that maybe somebody who's not used to making their own creature might not look at, but I've seen it happen where it's happened to me even when I first started out, where I would make a monster and I'd be like, oh, this is so cool. And it has all these different abilities that are going to affect, the battlefield or affect the players or whatever. And then how it boiled down during the initiative, where basically the whole party got to go before my monster would go. And then in like 2 or 3 turns, the monster was dead because it's getting hit 5 or 6 times in a row before it can respond.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you get into like your more legendary creatures that can take actions on the end of other other creatures' turns. So messing with players' turns and initiative order. But possibly something else that people don't look at is the location, the setting. You could take a creature that maybe isn't so powerful, but you put it in a way where the players they can't get away from it, or they're always in effect of its area or something like that.
Yeah, that's another good way.
So that can kind of change things too, where it's like, oh well, numerically my party could fight this creature, but because I actually had it in like, basically a kill zone where the party has no chance against this thing, and it just kind of happened that way. I didn't plan it. It turned out being far more deadlier than it would have been otherwise. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are all really good points.
We're great, we know. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you try. All right, so the next question that I have is when you are actually creating a creature, how do you determine things like its ability scores, its hit points, and other stats like that?
That is something that I kind of honestly like the way for hit points and for the ability scores, I always try to keep in mind off of players I like characters I've made.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm like, okay, like this character I had was pretty strong and he could do this. Well, how does he compare to this creature I'm making?
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to think in terms of that, or even when it comes up to like I'm going specifically against like my party in Toleraxia. I'll say, hey, I want this thing to be able to throw these guys around. So I have to look at, okay, well, BK might be, our Sean might be the strongest character, physical strength character.
Just
So
barely.
I want my monster to have a score that's equal to or maybe a little better than that character, so that so that the monster can accomplish these things.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
that's kind of how I do it. It's not like there's no formula to it. It's just I just try to feel it out.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I feel like as you play whatever tabletop game you're trying to create a creature for, as you play that more, as you create more characters to play in it, or overlord more sessions for it, you start to get that vibe. All right, something can do this basic level of intelligence, so it's gonna have a 10.
Mm-hmm.
This thing is more capable of smashing things, and it's supposed to be able to pick up big boulders, big things like that, so it should have an 18 plus type of strength. I a lot of the times love now, because a lot of tabletop games understand that their players create their own stuff. They do a lot of their own homebrews. They break down their own mechanics on how to create a monster, which is really cool. So like for Dungeons and Dragons, right in the beginning of that book of the monster manual, it goes through like, all right, if it's a large creature, it should have this hit die. If it's this challenge rating, this should be its proficiency bonus. So it'll go through a lot of the numbers that make up really the mechanics of it. The stats or ability scores are just plug and play. So to make your main attributes, right, your strength, dex, all those things for a creature is really just the same idea to making them for a character.
Mm-hmm.
You wanna have couple higher scores in the top. I mean, you could probably even do the normal breakdown for how to make a level 1 character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do a point distribution. This is
And I,
my
I also feel like a monster is somewhere where you could do the min max too. And
Oh
exactly.
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't really like to min max like characters because I just don't enjoy that. That's not the style of role
Yeah.
play I like. But for a monster, you could absolutely min max
Oh,
it.
100%. You're
You
supposed to,
know?
in a way. They're supposed to have
Yeah.
this big power and this big flaw.
Right.
And that's what you're working with. So now if you're going up against a party and you wanted to make something special for your party, you're going to have it so its strengths make it difficult for your party. Now they can't just hack and slash, they actually kind of have to strategize, and I think that's what everybody's really trying to look for when they're building an encounter in any tabletop game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like going back to what Cody was saying before, like building creatures around like a party, but like that's an interesting way of doing it, like building it around your specific players. But like I'm thinking more for like what we do for tabletop totality in general, like when you're creating a creature for like one of our quests or something like that. Like how do you
Oh,
determine their stats for those?
So
it's you can go
I
first, Cody. Yeah.
I'm just at the point where I'm just comfortable enough that I feel comfortable enough when I'm coming up with things that I don't really have to second guess myself a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just because I've gotten very used to doing it. That the campaign that I run for fifth edition is now into its third year, which is
Right.
the longest game I've ever played,
Hmm.
I've ever run. But I've had to make a lot of monsters, and then certainly for the business, we make monsters and creatures all the time. So I don't really have like a method or a formula. I just feel it out to where I think I'm comfortable.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, definitely having that comfortability is a huge point. Like as you create more, because you're just like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. Instead of when you're first creating, you're like, that doesn't really work, and you're like always second guessing it. So, that's a really cool point because it's not gonna come right off the bat. It's not gonna just boom ready. You
Yeah,
created an awesome creature. There's gonna be
and
a
I
lot
think
of
that
flaws.
yes, and I think that just kind of goes back to my style as a dungeon master too, because I like to leave myself enough room.
Mhm.
Like I don't like to put everything in one creature, one basket.
Yeah.
I like to give myself enough wiggle room so that I can adapt to how the game's going. So I
Mm-hmm.
do the same thing with my creatures. If I throw something out there that I didn't figure out properly, that is going to be really unfair or just kind of broken, I'll change it on the fly
Yeah,
to make it fit better.
yeah.
Um, and
That's not
that's not like
cheating. That's not
that's
cheating
not
either.
fudging the
That's
rules or anything.
literally just making a better encounter. It can happen at
Yeah,
any point.
Yeah.
yeah. And I hear, I mean, I see it all the time, on Reddit boards or something, people saying like, oh, I made this cool shadow dragon, this thing I came up with, I drew this awesome picture of it and made this monster and I killed my whole party. All my friends are mad at me, and it's like, yeah, like you got to kind of ease into it, and I think you also have to, at a certain point, recognize what you're doing with the creature
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and what it's really capable of.
Yeah.
And to give a shout out, there's a group out there. It's the monster knows what it's doing.
Yes.
Is the group, and they put out some books and they have a website. And I love looking at that when I'm looking at like an actual monster from like Wizards or something, because they do like a breakdown of this monster is capable of doing this. It has this intelligence, so it's smart enough to go after the weakest link in the party, or they get into like the actual like behavior of the creature,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of cool, and that's something that I've taken with me, where I say, well, what's the goal? What is the purpose of this creature?
Yeah.
What is it that I'm trying to accomplish with this creature? And then that's really what I focus on.
Yeah.
And so when it gets to, it's like, well, it does the thing I need it to do. Well, then I don't have to make all of its other stats and abilities amazing,
No.
because it does what I need it to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, those are all. Yeah. It's very much that that aspect of if if you're just creating a random creature, you still have some basic idea in your head. So, and I mean, we do it all the time when we're all just brainstorming together. There's certain creatures that we're like, oh man, I had this idea, and we're maybe talking about a different creature, but we're like, wait, hold on, let's go after that, and we build it, and it's some ridiculous creature, and like, yeah, we can't use this as a level 4 encounter, but hold on to that.
Yeah.
Put that away for later.
Yeah. Like that's a CR13 creature.
Yeah.
Can't use that right now.
Not for the level 1 party.
So there's a lot of that, and that's what I would recommend is maybe you're creating a creature and you're creating this cool shadow dragon like you were talking about on Reddit, and it's awesome, it's real beefy, it has like really cool aspects, but it's going to be too strong. Don't try and dumb it down to fit what you need it. Really just create a different creature. Save that later. If your party makes it that far, that could be one of the big mini bosses, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that helps because then you're still creating more creatures and you're getting that vibe. Sometimes, sit down and create a creature. I create 3 other creatures before I even can finish the one creature that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to get those ideas out until I really lock down. All right, yeah, that's too beefy. I gotta go this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people believe that they're only like, they're piloting the monster, they're controlling the creature or whatever, and they lose sight, or they lose the idea that the board isn't just on one plane, that you can do a lot with the whole world, so even if you get to a point where like, okay, the creature, you need the fight to go a little longer, you want it to be a little bit more dynamic or whatever, change the environment, have something happen, like have a catalyst happen that changes the balance of the battle, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way even too that you could use a tool for, oh crap, I made this shadow dragon and it's going to kill everybody in my party and people are going to be pissed off and that's not what I want to do. Okay, well now I'm going to make something happen that drives the dragon, you know, like the dragon has to flee temporarily or
Mm-hmm.
you know, that you can have all sorts of things happen. So you can't just, I think it's like your thinking can be more dynamic when it comes to these monsters because you have more to do than just the actual creature.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also imagine that, like, even like, I mean, like Neil, you said, like, don't dumb down the encounter, but I mean, if you're not sure if the creature is too strong, I would imagine that, for example, this shadow dragon looks really strong. What if I create like a young shadow dragon
Yeah,
with
exactly.
some of the abilities, or the abilities are weaker, and then use that to test out if this creature is going to be too strong?
that is a great idea, and that's kind of like what I meant. You know, look at it. You have, you know, you want this base creature, and this is how powerful it is, and then you're looking at it, and you're like, oh, that's way too many abilities. Don't get rid of that. Keep that. But
Yeah,
now create a new template that's a weaker version of that.
yeah, and
It's
then it can just come back later.
it's really what Wizards does with everything.
Mm-hmm.
They,
Yeah,
you
pretty
know,
much.
either one way or the other, they create a kobold. From that kobold, they make their wing kobold, their elite kobolds.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you can do it.
3 kobolds in a coat.
Yeah, you can literally do it from top to bottom or bottom to top. It doesn't matter. And you're still creating all these awesome creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So,
And I think probably, I'm sorry, Stephen, but I
that's
think
okay.
just to wrap that point up, you also remember, you know, the game isn't just played by the dungeon master or the overlord or the keeper or whatever. The players are involved too, and they can decide, hey, whoa, we're in too much trouble fighting this thing. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, so that's something also to consider, that at a certain point, if you want things to be a challenge or you want things to be very difficult for your party or your players, you don't have to necessarily change what you have
Yeah.
because you're trying to make that point. You're trying to set that precedence of, okay, no, you messed with a baby shadow dragon in the past. This is the ancient shadow dragon. You know, it can do way more.
Yeah.
And if your players don't recognize that, whoa, we threw everything we have at it and it's not even phased, you know, that's not necessarily on you. So
Yeah,
I
I'd
think
agree.
I think there's a little anxiety when it comes to, oh, I'm making my first creature or whatever. I don't want it to be too strong or too weak or whatever. You also have to remember that you're not the only person at the table.
Yeah, your players should realize when things are too strong.
Yeah.
To reevaluate what they're doing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Makes the game much more dynamic when you do that.
Absolutely.
Dynamic.
All right. So coming off of that question and going into like a more like sort of a related one, is it better to design creatures based on existing ones or to come up with completely original characters or creatures rather? It sounds like from the points that you made on the last question, it might be better for newer creators to base creatures on stuff that already exists, just sort of modify it a little and sort of wait on creating.
I think that's probably the path of least resistance.
Yeah. From the way that you made it sound, with you getting more comfortable with things as you go on, that sort of sounds like how it sort of should go. But I mean, like, it's kind of also up to, like, if the person feels like they can create a creature, they can try, and then.
Well, I think the idea for me always, like the inception of the idea is, oh, this creature is cool, but what if it could do this?
Yeah.
Or that's a cool ability, but I think it would be better used if it could do this. Oh, well, what if there's a creature that does that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's kind of the mentality I'm in. So I still have that, take something, make it mine, which is something that we try to promote with tabletop totality. No matter what you're playing, you know, rules is written, whatever, they're all guidelines. Make the game your game.
Mm-hmm.
Make the game you want to play and your friends want to play, that keeps everybody coming back and having fun. That's what you're supposed to do. So even when it comes to these monsters and everything, like, yeah, take something, make it yours, cool. And eventually you're gonna get to the point where you're gonna be like, I'm making this up all the way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's kind of how I started. Was all right. I'm gonna just tweak this. I'm gonna, change its ability or change its setting. Okay, this one lives in the desert as opposed to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that comes to, well, no, I have this idea. I'm gonna make this whole monster up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it is very much easier to adjust a creature or make a sub creature off of an existing creature, because that existing creature already has a very good understanding of what the mechanics of a creature should be. So that goes across any tabletop game. If the creators of that game created these creatures, they had way more mechanic testing and play testing than you will before you can throw it against your party. So to make, they have winter wolves. Well, now I want a desert wolf. What can if it's going to be around the same challenge rating, so it should have these basic stats, but hey, instead of it maybe in the winter it has to be a very strong hardy wolf. Well, now this is going to be an even more dexterous wolf because of the land it lives in, just basic changes like that. And then I get to a point like now that I'm pretty comfortable. Yeah, I could just go and be like, yeah, I want to create this character, do it, create it, and be pretty confident that it's going to hit my mark. But if it's ever like a lot of stuff that I do for tabletop totality, when somebody comes to me and has this creature and I'm looking over it and I'm reviewing it, I go, all right, what's a creature similar to this? So this is what it's doing. This is what it's meant to do. There is going to be some level of creature that is somewhat similar already created, of course. And I'll look at that creature and I'll be like, all right, it does this, this, and this. This creature does this, this, and this. Or, it has layer actions, and this is why it has layer actions. Yep, this creature has that, and it has those as well. So I use it as a reference guide, just to make sure I'm on the right mark a lot of the times with like my CR ratings and things of that nature.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great for any game, really, because you want to base your creation off of the system that you're running and the mechanics of the game, how things work. So by comparing it to the creatures they've created, that they've created for the purpose of the mechanics they're running, they've put some thought into how these creatures are. So to compare to what's already there, certainly puts you on the right track.
Yeah. Yep. It makes you understand, all right, why does this creature have these attributes, and should I have those attributes? CR isn't directly related to how much damage it can take and how much damage it can deal. There's very big changes for D&D on what influences that, and like for other,
the love you make and the love you take, man.
And then for a lot of other tabletop RPGs, it's like Symbaroum, which is a great one that we've played. It the creatures are more powerful by the more skills they have and the more leveling that they have, so the higher their skill levels are, for just basic abilities. And then for Call of Cthulhu, it's what effects happen to the players when they see this creature. Yeah, they're going to be dangerous to encounter regardless, but the encounter goes more than just physical damage. And that's where that elevates. So that's
And I think Cthulhu would be the one system where if you made the creature like impossibly strong and it devastated like your whole team of players, like nobody would fault you for that because
they would just be like, "Dang it!"
Cthulhu. Like,
that's just how these creatures work.
I shouldn't have messed with it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this thing's from another dimension. Of course, it would pull all of my bones out of my body and make
just
me
by
look
looking at me. Yeah,
before I die. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's my tips on that.
Okay. All right. So to follow up on that, the next question I have, Do you think that it would be a good move to build a creature basing it around a gimmick or a special feature they might be able to use, like a special ability, or using the arena that they're going to be fought in specifically as a way to build a creature?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you have a terrain and you know where they're going to be traveling, or you're doing just a random arena arc, oh yeah, build to that one aspect. Like there's points in times that I've like thrown people into arenas, and each wave has a focus on what that creature can do.
Yeah.
If anybody watched our live stream for Extra Life, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, Thorn Devils.
Yeah, so like I use Thorn Devils, which as mounts, which you can go onto our website and check out that creature. They're just very large. Yeah, they're very large lizards that are just covered in thorns. So anybody who gets close to them and attacks them takes damage. And then on top of them, I put our Goblin Lash Masters, which can deflect attacks with their reaction. So now here's something that protects its mount, protects itself, but also while its mount is just dealing damage.
Protect your neck, kid.
Yeah, exactly. And these are all like the concepts that like I built with that idea. I was like, this is what I want. Let me see what creatures I have, or do I need to create something? Luckily, we've already created something, and I was like, amazing.
Yep. It's just like the encounter I had when you guys fought the nature mother goddess in Palaraxia. I knew flat out, I was like, I want her to be able to manipulate not just the time as far as like rounds and things like that, but also manipulate magic as far as magic on the field, magic off the field, like
items, anything.
Yeah, she had a lot of control in areas that like maybe you're thinking more concern of armor class and hit points, where she had a lot of control in different aspects that made it a very difficult encounter.
Yes.
And I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted her magic to be strange and alien to you guys, and do things that you guys were kind of perplexed by,
Yeah.
And so that was the whole idea. As far as making a creature for a gimmick, I mean,
if you're doing a one shot,
I kind of thought about it like these guys, like they don't trust wells, because of something that happened like in a dungeon. They saw a well and they were like, "Why is this well here?" They thought I had something in it. I didn't have anything in it. They were super concerned. They're still concerned. And so if I made like a well mimic or something for that, that's just like a fan service,
Exactly.
To your game,
Right.
So I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Use your inside jokes,
Like if you're making a creature, if you're trying to make something like for the greater like role playing community to use, and you want it to stand up to par with like the Tarrasque or something, and it's based off of like it's a one trick pony, a one trick bone pony. It's not going to compare well. So,
know your market.
What you're creating,
Yeah, know your market. That's all I would say. Like, it is perfectly fine to create something for a gimmick. Like, you are a bunch of people getting together, and the idea that you're trying to have fun is the majority of the people who are playing, tabletop role playing games. That's the idea. So. Exactly.
The 1% that are sadists.
Yeah, well, it's a real issue.
Kill my character, please.
No, let's please stay up and play Monopoly again.
I love Monopoly. I don't know why everybody hates
you would.
it. I just love it. But use your inside jokes. Make it a fun time. But if you're looking to put something out like to be serious, then don't try and be as gimmicky. Like, but if that's what you like to do, then do it. There'll be people who appreciate it. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be many things that we put up that are going to be gimmicky through the whole time frame of tabletop totality. I already know it.
There's certain ones. Something by us that you think is a real dud, it was a gimmick.
But I mean, to focus on certain things, focus on terrain. That's how most monsters are created. If you kind of pull them out of what terrain they're supposed to be in, you weaken their CR. So that's a whole nother aspect of creating monsters. You could throw somebody against CR9, but if it's not in its area, all of those attributes don't stack anymore. So now it's like a 1. You know.
Well, that's just one of even like the most like simple things. Is like, okay, look at dragons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not all dragons have the same attributes because they're based off of different things. So like a blue dragon has a tunnel ability because it's supposed to be like burrowing in the sand.
Yep.
Right. Whereas a white dragon has a climbing ability because they're supposed to be able to climb. They like
supposed
climb
to be
up
on the
like in
mountains
ice caves
and
and stuff. Yeah. And not all of them can swim and things like that.
That's
and that's because they're based off of their setting.
Yep.
And that's also when you get into like the more heavy duty like layer creatures, where their layer is very much a part of the challenge, where there's effects because they're set up in this place or their power has manifested in this place. So definitely, terrain is a big deal. Even when it comes to like doing like a dungeon crawl or something like that, the terrain is a huge part.
100%. Like you're not going to just throw things in there that aren't attributed to like being in close combat. You're not going to throw a bunch of things that are range in a dungeon crawl unless your dungeon is built for range. You know what I mean?
So what happened when we nerfed that Illithid, right? The Illithid came after us. It was basically like a 12-foot tall ceiling. The thing cast levitate, so it's only 2 foot off the ground, and it thought it could fly away from us, but it was still in melee range, so it just kept taking hits. And that was just because that creature wasn't right for that setting.
Yeah, the terrain wasn't right for that creature. That's right. Either way you want to look at it.
So you have to keep that stuff in mind as well.
Yeah. So you want to give us one more before we head out here, Steve?
Yeah, sure. So one more question is,
make it a good one, Steve.
Yeah.
Real okay, so what, Steve? when you're creating a creature, how do you determine what like spells, actions, or abilities it should have?
That's where I like to get creative. That's where I like to try to not. And some of the things like we've posted up on Reddit, people have been like, well, why didn't you give it this thing that was an attribute from D&D Advanced 2.0? Well, because, first of all, I didn't go look through all the books and figure out, okay, well, here's a random ability that kind of makes sense for my creature. Instead, I was like, no, I'm going to give it something that does similar to what I need it to do. Right? Yeah. Like, just like we were working, remember we worked on that ooze monster recently?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, how does this thing perceive people? And we were like, we wanted to be able to perceive people based on their heartbeat. So it can only pick up on things that have a pulse.
Yep.
And it can do that to a certain range. And I don't need to go look through the book and find out if there's something that does something similar. I'm going to call it what I want to call it. I'm making it my monster.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just figuring out what type of special ability you want to give it, that's the fun part, man. Sometimes that's where I'll start with a creature creation, is I'll be like, oh, that's a great idea. What type of creature would have that? What type of terrain would it be in? Then I start exactly how I was saying. It doesn't matter. A lot of people try and build from baseline up. Oh, I want a wolf. Now that wolf does this, that, where, nope, I want a thing that has long. Yeah. Nope, now I want a thing that has lightning breath. Wolves. What lightning breath do I want to give it to? I'll work from a special ability down a lot of the time, and it just makes it, once you start doing things like that, you could just create a creature. Throw it right together. We had like one of the creatures that hopefully you all will see relatively soon is a real tricky one in swamps, and we were just trying to figure out how this, like, we were like, we want this creature that just like is all over the map. And we were like, how are we going to do that?
We want this creature to basically be able to mess with any portion of the battle map.
Yep. And that was the special idea. That was its abilities. That's what its spell was. And then we created from that. And those are always, I think, like one of the funnest ways to do it. It really is, like, because you have this crazy idea, and then it just keeps spiraling, and you're like, all right. And then that's usually how you make really powerful creatures.
And I, that kind of stuff. Like, I like doing that. Just like when I write, just for like my own writing, I don't normally like plan things out. Like I kind of just go where it takes me. And I like shooting from the hip, a lot. So improving things is fine by me. So when it comes to, taking something and changing it, or, even just focusing on one thing that I think is cool about a creature and then using that as the basis for a whole new creature.
Yep.
That process, a lot of the times that's where it starts. I'll look at something and I'll say, that's kind of a cool ability, but it's not enough, or it's not, it could be better suited if it was also able to do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Or what if you put it in a different setting? And I think that kind of comes, honestly, I know sometimes I'm poop about Magic the Gathering. I could be a little, and I used to play it a lot, and I loved it. And one of my favorite things was making decks, was looking for that synergy that came between, well, this creature can do this creature can do this. How do they all work together?
Yeah.
And so that's part of, that's rolled over into making my monsters too, where I'm like, I want all of its abilities and all of its stats to be, this thing is designed to do this.
Yeah.
This is what it does. This is what it's good at. This is how it stays alive.
Yeah.
No,
I mean that's it. You're definitely hitting it right on the head there. Like that's how I
crushing it.
Yep.
Sent it.
Yeah. So I mean, we could talk, as you could tell, we could talk for this for a long time.
We're talkers.
Big time. But I would like to hear from anybody who ends up listening. Like, what are some things that you struggle with? What are some things that
Reddit people
that you like to do? What are your tips? What are your creations? And maybe if you give us some of those tips, we'll end up trying to create a creature how you create it, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll give you credit for that.
And if you have more questions about it, we might try to answer them.
We're gonna forward you to Steve if you have more questions. He's been educated,
clearly the expert. Yeah,
he's got his permit to start making monsters.
Making.
We're excited. We're excited for him.
Oh,
MMP.
Sure you are. I'm excited too.
Monster making permit.
Yeah, monster making permit. So I just would like to thank everybody who came to stop by today. Again, Cody, Steve, and myself are always around to try and help the community out.
Yep.
We should also give a nice shout out to our friends over at Incarnate.
Yes.
Yes. If you guys are not using Incarnate if you're a game master and you are not using Incarnate to make your maps, you are missing out
100%.
Big time.
Yeah.
And they're not paying us, they're not sponsoring us or anything. We just love the program. We're big fans. And we use them exclusively for all of our stuff. We bought the commercial license, and so when we start doing releases of PDFs and things, all of our maps are Incarnate maps.
Yeah, everything you see, any encounter we put out, any map just for free grabs, that's all Incarnate, folks.
Yep, they've got a ton of stamps, they got a ton of lighting effects, they got a ton of all kinds of really cool stuff to really build your maps and really make them work.
You're a doodle bug? Amazing. You love doodling? You love drawing in your own stuff? Well, that's great, because you can import your own stamps.
Let's go, doodle bugs.
Come on.
This is what we do to Steve. This is a little slice of the business.
Yes, the inside,
Yeah, come on, Steve, doodle. Come on.
Doodle.
Yeah, more
Doodles.
doodles.
I'm trying so hard. There's only so much. My fingers are like nubs from how much.
But no, definitely shout out to Incarnate. They're a great group.
Yep.
They've always been great. They love to show off people's work as well. So if you like just making maps and you want to get more people to give you a little bit more critique, a little bit more tips, or just praise,
yeah, the
share.
community on Reddit for Incarnate is very very active. A lot of people are posting in there. There's always contests. I think there's a contest running. I don't know by the time we're done doing this, but they do contests all the time.
Oh yeah.
Usually based off of the new tools that you get in the program, or some of the new effects that you can use, and they try to have contests based off of these new aspects that you get for the program. Mm-hmm. But people are very friendly in there, and people have a lot of good advice. And I think I've become better at making maps just from interacting in that community.
Yeah.
I know I certainly have improved a lot from when I first started, but the whole system, the whole program has improved a ton.
Oh, it's everything they add is just another step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. But so check our website out, check incarnate.com out, and then thanks for stopping by. This has been
don't be strangers. Come on back to the Bone Pony Ranch.
We'll have more stuff for you, and it'll be just as good, if not better.
Yeah, fresh out the oven.
Biscuits.
Come on, Steve Doodle. Come on.
I'm trying so hard to.
All right, guys, get to making monsters.
Yeah, get to making monsters, and this is Neil from Tabletop Totality, and we'll catch you later.
Peace.
Bye.